I'd like to start this evening's talk with a poem by William Stafford called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So here we are at the new year. So this is, of course, a good time to reflect on what's most important and how to align our lives with what's most important. We find sometime that we do this and we call it the new year. Of course, we can do this at any time in our lives, but it's traditional. So tonight we'll be focusing on what's most important. Same thing with tomorrow morning. We'll be doing a couple of meditations to practice with that. Tomorrow evening, we'll talk about aligning our lives with what's most important. So I'd like to start with a sense that there's more than one kind of desire. There may be more than two, but I'm going to refer to two different kinds of desire. The first we might call ego desire. Ego desire is about fixing things, changing the environment or changing ourselves so that we'll feel okay. There's a sense of I'm grasping or I'm pushing away. We can feel ego desire in our bodies. When we're experiencing ego desire, it feels like we're actually grasping physically for something or pushing something away. We may not notice it most of the time, but if we pay attention, it's there, at least subtly. We can think of our ego desire as essentially being at the surface of our being. Tara Brach likes to call this our spacesuit self, the part of ourselves that's kind of on the outside, there to protect our being or make things happen. So that would be one kind of desire. A second kind of desire we might call our deepest desire. We might find that deepest desire located at the very core of our being, or deep within stillness, an emerging sense of desire. And our deepest desire is a non-grasping desire. It doesn't try to make something happen so much, but rather calls us in some kind of way. Our deepest desires come out of stillness. They come out of silence. They come out of quiet. Our deepest desires are emergent. Our deepest desires bring about a kind of transformation that our ego selves don't control. The ego is about control, sensing that I've got to make this or that happen. Our deepest desires are uncontrolled, spontaneous, emergent. D.H. Lawrence writes, people are not free when they're doing just what they like. People are only free when they're doing what the deepest self likes. And there is getting down to the deepest self. It takes some diving. It takes some diving. People are only free when they're doing what the deepest self likes. So I graduated college and I got a degree in chemistry and chemical engineering. Kind of like a silly kind of dual degree to have, but I could do it in 4 years. So I managed to get a double degree in chemistry and chemical engineering. And I got myself into a PhD program in chemical engineering on the West Coast. And I went out to the West Coast, and the very day I got there, I stayed at the home of somebody I'd known in college. He wasn't there, but everybody in that house was getting taken to a guest event of this program called LifeSpring. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, it was a program very similar to the old EST, or currently to the Landmark Forum, but I didn't know what it was. And I'm out there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get taken to this thing and it's probably a cult, but I'm logical. I'm going to be a PhD chemical engineer. They can't suck me in. I'll just go and see what it's about. So there's probably a half dozen people from this house go to this guest event, and I'm listening to it. And then they ask who wants to sign up. And of all the people who went to that guest event from that house, I'm the only one who signed up. And it's one of those situations that changed my life. But if I'd shown up one day earlier or one day later, I probably wouldn't even have gone. So it's kind of significant there. So what this turned out to be was a whole lot of experiential exercises, a whole lot of practices of one form or another. Give you an example. They would have everybody line up in two long lines, and each person had to go between the two lines in a different way than everybody else. And, it's an experiential way of showing that there's an infinite number of ways to get from one place to another, that it doesn't have to be just the same way. That's just an example. Many, many other more profound experiential exercises. What happened was, the last evening before the last day of the event, somehow, I won't go into the details of how, I got kicked into, in the evening at home, this sense of a core self. What it felt like was right at the center of my being, a little bit in front of the spine. It felt like this warmth all the way up the spine, out the head, down through the base of my spine, not base of my body, base of my torso. It wasn't through the spine, it was in front of it. It was visceral, this energy experience. And when I would ask of that energy experience what was important, a lot of different things came up. But probably the most significant one for this story was that I realized I didn't want to be a chemical engineering graduate student. I hated chemicals. I'd always loved acting and music when I was in school, and I was doing chemical engineering because it was safe, because I knew I could earn a living. Now, I was very naive at the time about the ways of the world, and just suddenly skipping out on graduate school would not have been anything my ego self would have done. My ego self would have said, do the safe thing, do the thing that will, give you security. But this core, this deeper wisdom somehow knew that what I really needed was to explore, to find out who I really was and where I really belonged. And that as long as I just stayed safe, I would be inherently suffering. I wouldn't have used those words back then. This was long before I knew anything about Buddhism. But there was this knowledge. And so there I was. It was 12 o'clock at night in California and 3 o'clock in the morning in New York, where my parents were living. And I'm calling them up in the middle of the night, and they're hearing me tell them that I'm not going to go to graduate school. I'm 4 days away from starting. And of course, my father, he's always about, let's make sure they do something practical so that they can, we're not having to feed them, basically. And he was always very good at trying to reason. He was the one who knew in the family. He was always the one who knew. It took a long time for me to realize that I knew too. He was the one who knew. So here he is trying to convince me, well, why don't you just try it out? Just see what happens. And I would try that experience on for a moment. What would it be like to just try out going to graduate school? Maybe it would be okay. But I knew it didn't fit because everything in this experience of this core said, no, this is what you need to do. You need to not go to graduate school. Now, that didn't mean I knew what I did want to do. I didn't. I knew that exploring would be okay. Don't know how, but somehow there was this deeper wisdom that knew. It was probably the most difficult decision I've made, or the most courageous, maybe that's a better word, I've made in my life in many ways, because there was such a not knowing what was going to happen. But there was this deep sense of the rightness of it. So I ended up staying out in California for about 5 more months, and I did more trainings, and I got myself into a nursing home reform organization, basically trying to get money for them by not going in different neighborhoods and knocking on doors and asking for money. That was probably the hardest job I ever had. I remember periods of time where I just sit on the side of the road just because I can't do this, and then finally getting my courage up to do it. And then eventually my father came up with the idea of teaching until I figured out what I really wanted to do. And that fit. It's like, okay, we can do that. Because I had the skills, I had the sense that I was with people for whatever else reasons. Turned out it took me 32 years to figure out what I really wanted to do. So I bring this story up because I want to just highlight the difference between an ego desire and something that's more fundamental, deeper. I'm going to be inviting us over the course of this weekend to really look at these deeper desires. We can look at the life of the Buddha before he was a Buddha. He was a prince. He had everything he could want. He had wealth, he had a family, community. And yet, if he had stayed with ego desires, he would have just stayed there. But something deep within him, when he discovered the issues of old age, sickness, and death, and realizing that it didn't matter how much money he had and how much comfort he had, that those things were not going away, that they were bigger than his wealth and his comfort. Something in him realized that he needed to leave, that he needed to find out what was permanent, what could be relied on. And this was a deep inner guidance that guided him in this direction, this deeper desire rather than the ego desire. Adyashanti, who is a spiritual teacher, will actually do some meditation tomorrow related to what he does. He guides a meditation that says, not my will, but the heart's will be done. That's the phrase. He says, that's the heart of all spiritual prayers. Not my will, but the heart's will be done. The my will is the ego will, the part of us that says, I want this, I want that, as we've been describing. And the heart's will is that deep inner desire. We might call it the divine will. Hard to know how to describe it. That will depend on your own personal orientation. But nevertheless, it's something found deep within. And it's the difference between grasping for desire and the unfolding of life. So one way to think about this deeper desire is that we're in two places at the same time. The first is to recognize that we're right where we need to be right now. And the second is that there's an unfolding. There's a kind of going somewhere. When we're tapping into our deepest desires, we're not grasping for some ideal. You know, we could say, oh, I want to awaken, or I want to fix the world, or whatever, which might be wonderful sentiments. But as long as it is an experience of the mind throwing out there, this is what I should be doing in some way, there's a kind of grasping. And it's a kind of ego's will. When we're sitting right in the heart's will, or our deepest desire, we know that at some level, we're in a progression. That's like the thread we're talking about in that first poem, right? There's a thread in this life. There's a sense that we're going somewhere along this thread, but we're right where we need to be right now, in this moment. One way we can think of this is the analogy of a plant. You know, John Kabat-Zinn has a couple of meditations where he invites people to embody either being a mountain or being a lake. They're very powerful meditations because the lake and the mountain have qualities. The mountain has this quality of stillness and solidity, and no matter what happens, we can just watch it and we still have that sense of beingness. And the lake has a sense of resting and a sense that no matter what's going on at the surface, we have this deeper reservoir of being. And so I used that one time in one of my meditation retreats to just try being all kinds of things. It was an amazing retreat for myself, but I was a tornado, and I was a gentle rain, and I was various animals, each one of them somehow bringing a quality that got to get absorbed in the being, gets absorbed in the subconscious mind. I mean, that's largely what meditation is about. It's an interaction between conscious mind and subconscious mind. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But the subconscious mind largely speaks to us in imagery and body sensations, not through logic so much, and maybe somewhat through thought, but largely imagery and body sensations. It's powerful, powerful practice to imagine being some element or some being. So let's take the analogy of a plant. You know, when we look at a plant, we say, oh, it's flowering, it's beautiful, right? When it's flowering. But it's only flowering for a little bit of the time. Right? What about all the rest of the time? What about when it's a seed, or it's a little shoot coming up out of the ground, or maybe it's growing but hasn't flowered yet. And then there's little buds that are there. And then it flowers. And all the flowers, all the petals come off. The seeds get fertilized, drops into the ground, dies away. All of that happens. All of that happens. The plant doesn't say, as it's a seed or a shoot coming out of the ground, why am I not blossoming right now? Or that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to blossom. That's what our ego selves do. It looks at some outside goal and says, I want to be doing that. And where I am right now, that's not good enough right now. When we are sensing into our deepest desire, there's a sense of where we are in this moment, in our progression, is exactly where we need to be. In fact, it's where we've been designed to be. Everything that's happened in our lives up to this point, including the genetics and all of the evolution that's occurred, plus all the experiences that we've had in our lives, bring us to this moment. And we're perfect just as we are. And we're growing. Something else is happening. So, what I'd like to do for just a couple of minutes is see if we can practice what that would be like. So, I'm going to invite you to just kind of find yourself in a meditative position. It might be helpful if we're going to be a plant or a tree of some sort to have the body a little bit more erect than maybe you might normally, because that's what happens with a stem or a stalk or or a tree, right? There's a sense of uprightness most of the time. And I'll invite you to just imagine for a moment that you are the seeds of this plant, that you are firmly in the ground, and that you carry within you all of the programming, all of the potential of the plant to be. You might sense that potential, and you might sense that you're exactly where you need to be, perfect just as you are. And then you're getting water. The earth is warming from the sun. There are nutrients. And out of this, you, the seed, shoots start to grow. And allow yourself to feel that experience. What's it like that these shoots grow out of the seed? That you are the seed and you are the shoots. And you're perfect just as you are. You're exactly where you need to be. And you're starting to grow. And you begin to grow roots into the ground. And you start to find that nutrients of the soil come into these root systems. And you grow a little taller. And you're exactly where you need to be. You're perfect just as you are. And leaves begin to sprout. And with these leaves, there's a sense of taking in carbon dioxide from the environment, taking in sunlight, letting the carbon dioxide and the water come together and form cellulose, the body of you. And somehow you know how to do all this. And you're exactly where you need to be, perfect as you are. And you continue to grow, and at some point, buds appear. And flowering occurs. And bees start to come by and pollinate the seeds that are deep within the flower. I hope I have the anatomy right here. And there's a sense of bursting forward, and maybe you have a sense that people appreciate the blooming flowers and the colors. But you are exactly who you are, whether anybody appreciates anything or not. And you're right where you need to be, perfect as you are. And the seeds get fertilized and they drop to the ground. And the petals wither. And with the coming cold, there's a dying down of the stalk, a flattening, a releasing. And you're perfect, just as you are. And you're right where you need to be. And taking a moment just to rest in the sense that at every moment, who you are, just as you are, is exactly how life intended you to be. And you're growing. And you're perfect just as you are right now. Okay. So hopefully there's some sense of what we're talking about regarding a deepest desire. My guess is that many or most of you have experienced this at some point in your life. But how do we get to this deepest desire? How do we know it? As D.H. Lawrence said, how do we dive to find what the deepest desire is, or the heart's longing, or the heart's will is? So first, it's helpful to give ourselves time and quiet. And of course, that's why you're all here on a retreat. When we're going through our day-to-day life, even if we're meditating on a regular basis, what tends to happen is once we get up and get out into the world, all of our clarity gets obscured. We can think of our mind like a snow globe. Got a little scene, it looks like in snow, and we shake it up, and we've got all these little white particles that obscure the clarity And that's what happens every time we're getting back out into the world and interacting with people, until we've really done a lot of internal work. But when we give ourselves time, when we move out of our daily world, it gives time for that snow globe material, whatever that stuff is, the snow, to gradually settle out and settle down. And then we're able to see more clearly. We're able to see more deeply what we're truly desiring. And when that settling has occurred, or at least to some degree has occurred, we simply ask the question. We ask the question, what's my deepest desire? What is the heart's will? What is my deepest longing at the core of my being? And then we wait for a response. This is not something we come up with from logical thinking. It's not about figuring it out. And it's often not habitual either. Maybe we've worked this out a while ago and it comes back again. But it's not, what the ego self habitually wants. There's a kind of emerging. As I said before, meditation allows for an interaction between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. And what is coming up is out of the subconscious mind. It's related to a sense of who we are at a deeper, more fundamental level. We have to give it time to emerge. And then how does it emerge? How do we even sense it? First of all, it's important not to try to force it. As with all insights in insight meditation, insights arise when they're ready to arise. Sometimes things seem like they're not happening and we're getting upset, and then suddenly something occurs and then boom, we have an insight. So we let it be. Let it arise when it's time. But how do we sense what is deepest within us? So there's a lot of different ways. A lot of it will depend on your own system. But one of the ways it shows up is as body sensations. We have a gut feeling, or we have a feeling in the core of our being. Something that says, when I think of this, the gut feels right in some way, or the core feels aligned in some way. Or sometimes these experiences will show up as imagery. It could be all sorts of shapes and sizes, and at first we may not really understand with the rational mind what we're even observing. But somehow something is known. We might even interact with that image and see what occurs. Sometimes the response is in words. We might get a body sensation or an image, and then we translate it into words. Somehow we're able to make that translation so that the conscious mind can be aware in concept what's most important. Or sometimes it just shows up as a deep knowing. And knowing that maybe we can't even name, but it in some way guides us. Now, we don't always know what's coming up. We don't always understand what's coming up. We might get some false impressions. And how do we know that? Maybe several different things arise. We bring them up and we try them on. we get a felt sense in the body. So I'll give you an example. The guru of what we would call focusing, a guy named Eugene Gentlin, talked about this felt sense in the body. And he gives this example. He says, imagine you're about to get on an airplane and you feel something's not right, but you don't know what it is. And you wonder, is it a problem with the airplane? And you try that on, and no, that doesn't feel like that's it. Did I forget to lock the door? No, that's not it. Oh, there were those letters I meant to send out and I didn't send them. And then that's it. And because there's an alignment. There's an alignment in the body. It's like suddenly the energetic body and the physical body seem to be aligned somehow. It's that kind of experience. When various senses of what's most important arise, we try them on and we see, is it a fit? Is it a partial fit? Is it not fitting at all? We get to try it in that kind of way. So that's what happened when I talked to my dad. And I said to him, or he said to me, just try graduate school out, see what happens. Maybe you'll like it. And I tried it on, and it didn't fit. And then I tried on not going to graduate school and finding out what I really wanted to do and exploring, and that was a fit. And so that was the choice that I made. So here's another way to consider what's most important. A fellow teacher, one of my compatriots, Beth Reese, likes to choose a New Year's word rather than a resolution. And she writes in her blog, choosing a word sets an intention. That's all we need to understand. It's not a verb. It's not an action. Not something to add to the to-do list. Instead, it's something to wonder about. It's best to choose a noun, something with a life of its own, something to lead you, not something to conquer. And like a treasure, it's best to hold it lightly, gently, with reverence, with confidence. The rest is an adventure. Just follow where it leads. Now, the first time Beth did this exercise, she chose the word truth. She would hold that awareness of truth as her guide, so that as she would move through her world, as there were decision points, it would always be measured against, how is that relating to truth? Does it seem to lead towards truth or away from truth? And with each decision she made, it ultimately led her to her discovery and engaging in a mindfulness practice. Here are some other words she's chosen: receptivity, love, blossom, patience. Some of her friends have chosen words like action, commitment, joy, home. For a long time, over 30 years, essentially my word has been waking up or awakening. I remember the first time I was I'd gotten drawn into a psychic church. I was very interested in psychic phenomena at the time, and was actually becoming a minister. Um, that's an old thing about me. I'm a minister in a psychic church, which I haven't been actively involved in for a very long time. But nevertheless, one of the teachers there did a reading, and the reading was of Yogananda describing this non-dual experience that he was having, where he was all these different beings. And something in me just lit up. And there was this awareness of that's where I needed to go. That's what was important. And it's been a very, very long journey, and one that's not over yet. But holding that awareness of what's important is waking up has led me in a very circuitous path. But with each episode, greater and greater freedom, greater and greater aliveness starting to happen. In the current year, what I'm noticing right now along that path is, for me, the word is non-reactivity. I've become acutely aware of the little moments where I get reactive. Something doesn't go quite the way I want it to. And there's this sense of tightening up, or a little bit of anger, or a little bit of resistance. It shouldn't be this way. And a recognition that every time that's happening, that's not moving me in the direction of waking up. So learning how to cultivate greater and greater non-reactivity. But I also realized that non-reactivity is a not word. It's what I'm not trying to do. So the question is, where am I going? And it took me a little bit of time to really sense into what is the right fit. And it seems right now that the closest word that I can come up with is serenity, a deep sense of peace. So that's my leg of the journey right now, where it's taking me. So we'll be curious to see where you're headed. Perhaps we're about to, in a few moments, engage in our first meditative practice around what's most important to you. We'll do a couple more tomorrow. Perhaps what will arise for you is just a word that's guiding you. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So we're going to do a meditative practice now. Once again, I'll invite you to come into a meditative position, whatever that looks like for you. It doesn't have to be super aligned or anything. Whatever feels comfortable for you right now. I'll invite you for a few moments just to bring your attention to the flow of your breathing. To listen to sensations with your body. To listen to stillness and silence. And I'll invite you to take a little bit of time to sense into your life from when you were born until now. For some of you, if you are into past lives, you can go even before, but really just sensing, what is the arc of this life so far? What is the thread that's being followed? That's at the core of your experience. It's possible that you'll just get a sense of that. It's also possible that you will recall particular experiences and how, when they occurred, there seemed to be a greater sense of what was at the core of this life. What is that thread? I'll give you a minute or two to just kind of review this life up to this point, getting a sense. Letting that sense of the arc of your life, whether it's understood consciously or not, just sink in to your being, letting yourself rest with it. And sensing that who you are now is a function of everything that's happened before and beyond your life, but everything that's happened everywhere before. This is a life emerging. And now I'll invite you to bring to mind yourself from the future. Maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's many years from now. Maybe it's both. Let your inner guidance bring to mind some sense. You don't have to have a clear visual experience, but some sense of yourself in the future who knows what you're about to go through, who knows how you're growing and changing. And that future self has a gift for you, something that will help guide you. And that future self puts that down at your feet. And then you look at it. Perhaps you pick it up, perhaps you unwrap it, but you see what's there. And the invitation for the next few minutes is to simply sit with whatever that gift is, even if it's nothing at all. Letting that gift that helps you guide you for where you're going become part of your being, whether you understand it or not. Perhaps it's a mystery, perhaps it's clear. But sitting with this gift, incorporating this gift, contemplating it, Rilke writes, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given to you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now, and perhaps, without knowing it, you will come along someday into the answers."